The moment the robot went dark, everyone on the ship went quiet. For 500 meters of descent, it had been sending back clean video, steady numbers, perfect sonar. Then the feed died. No distress call, no error code, no final word. Just silence from 20,000 feet down, where the pressure can crush a steel sphere like a soda can. The crew stared at the blank screen. They checked the tether. They sent the wake-up command again and again. Nothing answered. And then, hours later, the impossible happened. The robot came back to life and sent one last transmission. What it sent back changed how we see the deepest places on Earth, and by the end of this story, you will understand why some people who work in the deep refuse to go back down there at all. There is a reason the deep ocean has confused scientists for centuries. Almost every culture that touched the sea has told stories about it. Ancient sailors feared it. Fishermen respected it. Old mapmakers filled its blank spaces with sea monsters. And for most of human history, that was the whole picture. The deep was a void, a great dark nothing, a place too cold, too black, too crushed for anything to live. So there is an obvious assumption hiding underneath all those stories. The deep sea must be empty, a desert of mud and darkness where nothing grows and nothing moves, a place that only a brave machine would ever visit, and a place that machine would find nothing in. But what the robot sent back is telling a very different story. The deeper scientists look, the less the deep resembles an empty desert, and the more it resembles a hidden world that has been alive the entire time. The pressure is real. The cold is real. The darkness is absolute. And yet life is everywhere. Dense, strange, glowing, feeding, hunting, surviving, in ways that should be impossible. The old assumption was built on a simple lack of evidence. We assumed the deep was dead because we had never actually looked at it. And when we finally built machines smart enough to look, the first thing they found was that we had been wrong about almost everything. To understand that story, forget the sunlight for a moment. The ocean is a staircase of dark, and every step down strips away another layer of our world. In the first few hundred feet, blue light still follows a diver down, and fish flash silver in the glow. Below that comes the twilight, where hunters hide and light fades to gray. Deeper still, the last photon dies, and past around 3,000 feet, the ocean becomes a place the sun has never touched, black as the inside of a closed eye. This is the midnight zone, and it covers most of the planet. Everything below this line lives in a darkness that has never once seen daylight since the oceans first formed. The robot was built to cross that line and keep going. It was a machine of glass spheres and titanium, of cameras and robotic arms, of thrusters that could hold a position against deep ocean currents. It had a tether like a lifeline, a cable carrying power and command down from the surface. The mission was simple on paper. Drop to the seafloor of a deep trench, study the mud, measure the cold, film whatever lives there. Thousands of miles from any coast, a research ship hovered over water so deep that the bottom lay more than 6,000 meters down. The crew lowered the robot over the side, and the machine began its long fall into the black. The descent takes hours, and every hour costs something. The light changes first, blue to violet to nothing. The water cools with every meter, dropping toward freezing. The pressure builds slowly at first, then relentlessly, 1 full atmosphere for every 10 meters of depth. By the time the robot passes 10,000 feet, the weight of the water above it is beyond anything a human body could survive for more than a heartbeat. The steel bends, the glass strains. The readouts on the ship climb into ranges that sound more like a physics exam than a dive report. And still the robot sinks, deeper and deeper, into a black that has no floor except the one it is hunting for. This is the part of the dive that always feels wrong, even for the people who built the machine. The sonar paints the bottom as a flat line far below. The cameras show only falling particles of what sailors call marine snow, the slow rain of dead things drifting down from the surface world. There's no wind, no weather, no sound except the hum of the robot's own systems. Anyone who has watched a deep camera feed knows that moment. You're looking at a place no human will ever stand, lit by a single lamp, and the silence is so complete that your own heartbeat feels too loud. The ocean does not care that the robot is here. It simply holds it, millions of tons of water pressing down from above. And then the robot went dark. It happened between one camera frame and the next. The screen froze on a blur of black sediment. The numbers stopped updating. The noise from the tether changed pitch and then stopped. The operator called out the time and the depth, 20,100 feet, almost exactly 6,100 meters down. Commands went down the cable and nothing answered. The ship waited. The silence stretched into minutes and then into an hour. On a vessel far from any shore with no rescue possible and no backup robot ready, there's nothing to do but wait and watch a dead screen. And that is when the story of the deep becomes a story about fear. Because machines do die down there, and the ocean does not apologize. In May of 2014, a deep diving robot named Nereus was exploring the Kermadec Trench northeast of New Zealand, one of the deepest places on Earth. It had already proven itself. It had reached the very bottom of the Mariana Trench. It had mapped seafloor no vehicle had ever touched. Then, 9,990 meters down, the signal stopped. The robot was never recovered. Scientists said the pressure had finally won, that the sphere had simply imploded under forces so crushing that the collapse probably happened in a fraction of a second. One moment, a brilliant machine. The next moment, nothing. Why? 6 years earlier, another machine had vanished the same way. Japan's robot Kaiko had been the deepest diving vehicle in the world, the machine that went back to the bottom of the Mariana Trench and brought up the first samples from that abyss in more than 3 decades. In 2003, it was working in the Nankai Trough, a great underwater canyon near Japan, when its secondary cable snapped in the deep. The robot that had touched the deepest floor on Earth became a lost object falling into darkness, unreachable, unrecoverable. Bad weather closed in on the surface and the search had to stop. Kaiko was gone. These losses are not failures of engineering. They are the price of visiting a place that does not let visitors leave. Kaiko ROV. And that is the part of the story people rarely hear. The deep has a body count, and it counts machines and men alike. In 1963, the submarine Thresher sank with all hands in the North Atlantic, and her shattered hull was found on the bottom at a depth of more than 8,000 feet. In the years since, navies have quietly recovered wreckage from depths that would have been unthinkable to earlier generations. Surveyors, operators, and explorers have all learned the same lesson the hard way. Below a certain depth, there is no rescue. There is only recovery if you're lucky. The pressure is patient. It waits at the bottom for anything that falls, and it does not care how smart you are. So when the robot on our ship finally spoke again, nobody celebrated quickly. The signal came back as a single burst of data, hauled up through the tether like a bucket from a well. The first frame of video arrived pixel by pixel, gray and grainy. The crew leaned in. What they saw made no sense at first. Shapes were moving on the seafloor, not rocks tumbling in a current. Deliberate, slow, alive shapes. The robot had gone dark, and during the silence, it had kept filming, kept recording, kept listening. And what it captured during those lost hours is the reason this story exists at all. The robot did not survive because it was lucky. It survived because the deep is not what we thought it was. The first thing the video showed was a world of mud that was somehow not empty. Tiny glowing specks drifted through the beam of the lamp, organisms so small the camera barely caught them. On the bottom itself, strange structures covered the sediment, some shaped like cups, some like tangled webs, some like fields of pale flowers. To the untrained eye, they looked like rock or coral. To the scientists on board, they looked impossible. These were not plants. They were not even animals. Some of the largest single cells on the planet grow here, organisms called xenophytophores, one single cell that can grow as large as a human hand. One cell, alone, building a body big enough to hold. Schmidt Ocean Institute. It sounds like a mistake. A single cell should be invisible, a speck, something you need a microscope to see. But in the deepest trenches of the ocean, single cells grow to the size of coins and fists and palms. They build shells out of the sediment around them, gluing grains of mud into fragile homes. They sit on the bottom in gardens that stretch across the abyssal plains, and they have been found more than 10.5 kilometers down, in the very deepest scar on the surface of the Earth. For years, scientists thought the bottom of the ocean was too poor to support life. These giant cells prove that even where food almost never arrives, life still finds a way to build a body and wait. National Geographic. And the cells are only the beginning. As the video continued, the lamp caught something else, a pale shape sliding along the bottom. A fish. Not a sick fish stunned by pressure, but a healthy, hunting, living fish. It was small and almost transparent, with a face like a sad puppy and skin like jelly. It moved with a calm that seemed impossible at 20,000 feet. Scientists now know that fish like this hold the record for the deepest living fish ever filmed, with one individual recorded at more than 8,300 meters down, deeper than many airplanes fly high. The discovery forced biology to rewrite what it believed about where backboned animals can survive. NHM, the snailfish survives because it does something remarkable. Most fish build their bodies around a swim bladder, a gas-filled balloon that controls buoyancy. At depth, gas becomes a death sentence. The deepest fish have simply abandoned the idea. Their bodies are soft and gelatinous, built of water and jelly rather than hard bone and air. Their chemistry has changed too, loading their cells with natural compounds that stop proteins from crushing themselves under pressure. They are not struggling to survive down there. To them, the shallow world above is the impossible place. A snailfish near the surface would fall apart like a creature from another planet. The deep is their home, and we are the visitors. Science Direct. Where the snailfish go, the scavengers follow. The lamp showed swarms of translucent shrimp-like creatures, amphipods, darting through the water in clouds. Some of these deep amphipods grow to monstrous sizes, giants of their kind, scuttling across the bottom in armor like living tanks. They are the cleanup crew of the hadal zone, the first responders to anything that dies and falls. They move fast enough to strip a carcass within hours. When the robot lowered its sampling arm, the amphipods attacked it, swarming the strange visitor from the light world above. The crew watched 100 tiny eyes investigating the machine, and for a moment the robot seemed less like a tool and more like a stranger walking into a crowded room. This is the part that changes how you see the whole ocean. The old picture of the deep was a starving desert, a place where food almost never arrives. That picture was wrong in ways that scientists are still trying to measure. The surface ocean rains food downward constantly. Dead plankton, fish scales, drifting bodies that never fully decompose, a slow and constant snow of energy. When something large dies, a whale, a shark, a school of fish, it falls as a feast. A single whale carcass can feed an entire city of deep sea creatures for decades. First, the scavengers eat the flesh, then the bone-eating worms arrive, and finally, a generation of microbes turns even the skeleton into soil. The deeper the story goes, the stranger the rooms become. In the Gulf of Mexico, robots have found pools of water sitting on the seafloor like lakes within the sea, and they are deadly. These are brine pools, formed when ancient salt deposits leak into the deep, creating water so dense and so salty it will not mix with the ocean around it. The pools have shorelines, they have surfaces, they even have ripples that look like slow waves. Anything that wanders into them dies poisoned by salt and sulfur. Sailors who saw them for the first time named one of them the Jacuzzi of Despair, and the name fits because the edges of the pool are lined with the bodies of things that did not turn away in time. Ocean X, and yet even at the edge of a poisonous lake at the bottom of the ocean, life refuses to stop. Around the brine pools, scientists have found mussels and bacteria living on the very border of the deadly water, using the salt itself as a source of energy. Deep-sea corals grow in gardens that look like forests from a dream. Sponges the size of cars sit on the abyssal plains, where scientists once believed nothing could survive. Every time a robot reaches a place we thought was empty, the robot sends back proof that we were wrong. The pattern is so consistent that the old assumption has quietly reversed. The deep is not a desert at all. It may be the largest habitat for life on the entire planet. The most famous proof came in the late 1970s, and it came from a robot dropped into the Pacific near the Galapagos Islands. Cameras built for darkness were lowered onto the seafloor, and what came back changed biology forever. Where hot water poured out of the Earth's crust through cracks called hydrothermal vents, the seafloor was crowded with creatures no scientist had ever seen. Giant tube worms stood in forests, each one crowned with a red plume like a flower of blood. Crabs crawled in armies. Shrimp swarmed. Fish circled. All of this life, living in pitch blackness, at temperatures that would boil a human body, feeding on chemicals that would poison us. The sun had never touched this world. It did not need the sun. That discovery was the moment the deep sea stopped being a void in the human imagination. The vent ecosystems run on chemosynthesis, a way of making food from chemicals instead of light, and they proved that the machinery of life is far more flexible than anyone had believed. If life can thrive in a boiling black chimney at the bottom of the Pacific, powered by poisons from inside the Earth, then the old rule of the sun no longer applies. This single discovery changed the search for life beyond our world. Scientists began looking at frozen moons and dark oceans with new eyes, because they had learned that life does not need a sun. It needs energy and water, and the deep ocean now looked like the best school of survival on Earth. The robot's footage from the trench was cut from the same cloth. It showed fields of anemones waving in a current no human will ever feel. It showed sea cucumbers plowing the mud like slow-living tractors. It showed jellyfish drifting with tentacles trailing like ribbons, some of them glowing with their own light. Bioluminescence, the deep's private language, lights up more than 3/4 of the creatures that live below the sunlit world. They flash to lure prey, to blind attackers, to find mates, to speak across the black. The robot's lamps were not welcome here. To the creatures of the deep, the robot was simply a wandering sun, and they reacted to it the way creatures of the night always react to fire. One image from the footage became famous among the scientific crew, though it was never shown to the public. The camera had caught a glimpse of something large moving at the edge of the light, too distant to identify, too steady to be a school of fish. For 2 full minutes, the shape paced the robot's course, keeping the same distance, matching every turn. Then it was gone, leaving nothing but the dark. Sonar on the surface logged a faint return that no one could explain. The footage was filed, labeled, and quietly set aside because it raised questions that had no answers. And that is the pattern of the deep. Every answer the robots carry back to the surface opens a door onto a room that is even darker. There is a reason the deep has produced more legends than any other place on Earth, and modern instruments keep feeding those legends. Sonar contacts at depth are a language of their own. On ships, in submarines, in the control rooms of oceanographic vessels, operators have spent decades watching blips appear and vanish on screens, returns from deep water that have no explanation. Some are schools of fish, some are currents carrying debris, some are known and understood, and some are not, and those are the ones that stay in the memories of the people who saw them. The ocean is the only place on Earth where a contact can appear, move, and disappear without anyone ever learning what it was. The weight of that mystery settles on everyone who goes deep. Imagine being the person in a submersible thousands of meters down, the only human for miles in any direction, when the sonar picks up something moving alongside the hull. The hull creaks. The water is black. The something is not showing up on the cameras, only on the sound, patient, curious, close. This is the fear that drives so much of the deep's dark reputation. We fear the deep, not because it is empty, but because it is full, and we cannot see what fills it. Every instrument is a blind hand reaching into a room we will never enter, and sometimes the hand comes back holding something we cannot name. And yet the robots keep going down because the reward outweighs the fear. The same machines that watch strange shapes in the dark have found the things that matter most to understanding our own planet. They found the wreck of the Titanic resting in darkness at nearly 4,000 meters, lying on the bottom like a monument to a lost world. They found the wreck of a destroyer named Johnston in the Philippine Sea, her hull resting at more than 21,000 feet, the deepest shipwreck ever fully surveyed, a warship that fell in battle in 1944 and now lies deeper than almost anything humans have ever placed on the seafloor. Every one of those finds came from a robot descending into the dark. USS Johnston. There is a strange poetry in that list of wrecks. The same deep that crushes machines also preserves them, holding them in cold and darkness like a museum sealed by pressure. The Johnston rests far deeper than the Titanic, her guns still aimed, her hull still recognizable, the wreckage of a battle frozen in time. When the survey robot reached her, its lights revealed a ship that had been waiting 70 years for visitors. The wooden parts of the deck had been eaten away by the sea, but the steel remained, and the robot moved over her like a diver moving over a sleeping giant. The deep does not destroy everything. It keeps the things it takes, and it keeps them well. That preservation is why the deep keeps drawing humans back, even knowing the price. We send robots down not just to find wrecks, but to read the history written in the sediment. The mud at the bottom of the ocean is a library. Each layer is a year, each grain a record of climate, of volcanic eruptions, of the rise and fall of ice ages. Robots punch cores into that mud and bring up cylinders of time, and scientists read them like pages of a book. Some of those pages go back millions of years. The deep sea floor is the quietest, most complete archive of the history of life on Earth, and only robots can read it, because no human hand can ever hold that mud. So when the robot on our ship finally surfaced from its silence, it brought up something more valuable than any single image. It brought up proof that the way we were taught to see the ocean was incomplete. The scientists on board spent weeks analyzing the footage, the water samples, the mud cores. They found microbes living in the sediment that were new to science. They found chemical signatures in the water that had never been measured at that depth. They found evidence that the deep currents are not still and silent, but slow and powerful, moving water around the entire planet like the veins of a sleeping body. The robot had gone dark at 20,000 feet and come back with a new world inside its memory. And this is where the story turns personal, because the deep is not a distant problem. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet, and the deep sea is the largest living space on Earth. If you could scrape the continents flat and pour all the land into the sea, the ocean would still cover the planet. The volume of water below 3,000 meters is so vast that our entire world of cities and forests amounts to a thin film on the surface. We live on the roof of a much larger planet, one that is dark, cold, and almost entirely unmapped. And we still know more about the far side of the moon than we do about the bottom of our own ocean. The numbers are so large they stop feeling real. The Mariana Trench reaches nearly 11 kilometers down, a depth so extreme that you could drop Mount Everest into it and still have well over a mile of water above the summit. The pressure at the bottom is more than 1,000 times the pressure at the surface, enough to crush almost any structure humans know how to build. And yet, the trench is not the exception in the ocean. It is simply the deepest example of a rule. Everything below about 4,000 meters, the abyssal and hadal zones, covers more than half of the entire seafloor of the planet. Half of the Earth's solid surface lies underwater so deep and so black that no human has ever seen it in person. The robot that went dark and came back is one of a small family of machines that carry the human eye into that blackness. Balls of titanium, cameras sealed in glass that can survive the squeeze, robotic arms that work in water cold enough to stop a heart. These machines are the body of the explorer, sent where the explorer cannot go, and every dive is a risk calculation. The tether can snap, the sphere can crack, the seals can fail at the worst possible moment. The crews know all of this, and they lower the machines anyway because the deep keeps promising something at the bottom of its darkness, and humans have never once been able to resist a promise like that. What is the promise? That is the question the whole story keeps circling. Maybe it is the promise of new life, of creatures that could rewrite the textbooks. Maybe it is the promise of resources, of metals and minerals scattered across the seafloor in concentrations no mine on land can match. Maybe it is the promise of answers, of understanding how this planet works, how its currents move, how its climate breathes, how its deepest places remember the past. Or maybe the promise is simpler. Maybe humans go down there to prove that we can, to touch the last frontier on our own planet before we hand all our wonder to the stars. The robot's last transmission did not answer the question. It only made it louder. And that is the true gift the deep gives to anyone who listens. It refuses to be finished. Every expedition returns with a list of new questions longer than the list of answers. The snailfish raises questions about how far adaptation can go. The giant single cells raise questions about the limits of one cell. The vents raise questions about where life begins and what it needs. The brine pools raise questions about worlds within worlds. The sonar contacts raise questions that no instrument has yet answered. Scientists now call the hadal zone the last frontier of ocean exploration, and they mean it literally. We have better maps of other worlds than we have of the deep sea floor. The dark is not empty. It is unfinished. By now you understand why the crew on that ship did not celebrate when the robot returned. They knew they had been lucky. The silence at 20,000 feet could have lasted forever, like it did for Nereus, like it did for Kaiko, like it did for machines and men whose names never made the news. They knew that the deep gives and the deep takes, and that the line between those two things is not written anywhere. They also knew something else, something the video had shown them. The world they had seen down there, the glowing specks and the patient fish and the gardens of single cells, had been alive the whole time, waiting in the dark for the first visitor to arrive carrying a light. We like to think of exploration as a story of humans conquering places. The deep teaches the opposite lesson. Down there, humans are the ones who are lost. We are the fragile ones, the ones who need machines to breathe, light to see, and walls to survive the pressure. The creatures of the hadal zone do not need any of that. They live in a universe of crushing weight and perfect darkness and call it home. The robots we send are ambassadors from a world of air, and every transmission they send back is a message from the edge of everything we are. It repeats the same idea over and over in every color of light and every strange shape. What it says is this: life is not a thin skin on the surface of the world. It is a web that reaches down through every layer of the sea, into the deepest trench, onto the darkest floor, into the sediment below, anywhere water can reach and energy can flow. The old picture of a dead deep was built on our own weakness, on the fact that we could not go there, and we mistook our limits for the limits of nature. The robot did not find an empty wasteland at 20,000 feet. It found a city, and the citizens of that city have been there since long before the first human looked up at the first star. There is a humbling thought in all of this, and it is the one the deepest divers carry home. The pressure that crushes our machines is nothing to the creatures that live in it. The cold that would stop our blood is their ordinary morning. The darkness that terrifies us is their daylight. We measure the deep by what it does to us, by how far we can endure, by how much weight our machines can carry. They measure the deep by nothing, because to them it is simply home. Every robot that goes down and comes back up carries that correction with it, a quiet fix to the human habit of thinking the world was made for us. The deep was not made for us. It was made before us, and it will be here after us. Before this story ends, there is one more transmission to consider, and it is the most important one. It came not from a robot, but from the only men who ever stood on the deepest floor of the ocean in person. In 1960, two explorers took a tiny steel sphere called the Trieste down into the Mariana Trench, more than 10 kilometers below the surface, and landed on the bottom. They expected a lifeless world. Through the tiny porthole, they saw a fish swimming at the bottom of the deepest place on Earth, in water crushing enough to kill anything that lived in the sunlight. That single fish is the whole story of the deep in one image. Wherever we can reach, life is already there. 6 decades later, the message has only grown louder. Surveying robots, autonomous vehicles, and crewed submersibles have now touched more of the deep than all the centuries of sailors before them combined. And every new dive returns the same verdict. The deep is not a void. It is the most successful habitat on Earth, the home of creatures we are still naming, the keeper of history we are still learning to read. The more we learn, the more we understand that the ocean was never a wall at the edge of the human world. It was always the floor of the world itself, and we are only now learning the true dimensions of our own house. So the next time you hear that a robot went dark in the deep, remember what you know now. Remember that the dark is not empty. Remember that the pressure does not mean the end of life. It just means the beginning of a different kind of life. Remember the snailfish sliding calmly through water that would fold steel. Remember the single cells the size of your hand. Remember the forests of tube worms feeding on fire and the lakes of poison ringed by survivors. The robots that go down into that world are not looking for emptiness. They are looking for the strangest, most resilient neighbors any species has ever had. And sometimes the neighbors are looking back. And if you have watched this far, then you already know what the crew on that ship learned during the hours of silence. The fear of the deep is real, and it is honest, because the deep deserves respect. But the wonder is real too, and it is bigger. Every time a machine goes down into the black and comes back with proof of life, the old story shrinks a little more. The story that says we are alone. The story that says the dark is dead. The story that says nothing worth knowing hides at the bottom of the sea. That story is wrong, and it has always been wrong, and the robots are finally telling us the truth in every language they have. Tell me your theory about what was moving at the edge of the light. Comment below what you think the sonar heard, because every answer you type is one more piece of the map we are still drawing. If this dive into the deep stayed with you, subscribe so you do not miss the next ocean mystery, because there are more and they are darker and they are all real. The trenches of the Pacific, the lakes under the sea, the wrecks that wait in the black, the shapes that move just past the edge of the light. We are only beginning to map them, and every map we make leaves more questions than answers. The ocean is not done with us yet, and we are nowhere near done with it. And one last thing before the light goes out. Somewhere down there at the bottom of a trench you will never visit, a robot is working right now, or maybe it is already dark, its lamp cold, its tether silent, resting on the mud like a monument to curiosity. If it ever sends anything back, look at it closely, because the deep has a way of keeping its oldest secret closest to its chest. The secret is not that the deep is empty. The secret is that the deep is full, and it was full before we ever learned to dive, and it will be full long after we are gone. The dark was never empty. It was only waiting.